The belief that keeps you poor was never about money. It was installed before your first paycheck, reinforced by people who loved you, and it wears the disguise of wisdom. You call it caution. It calls itself common sense. It is neither. It is the quiet reason you keep almost arriving. Most people search for the poor belief in the wrong place. They look for greed or laziness or bad luck. But the belief that actually keeps someone poor is rarely loud enough to notice. It sounds like patience. It sounds like humility. It sounds like being realistic. It is the voice that tells you to wait for a better time to ask for the raise, to let this quarter pass before you make your move, to keep your head down one more year. Because it sounds so reasonable, you have never once questioned it, you've defended it, mistaken it for your own good sense, and that is exactly why it has survived this long. Here is the belief. Somewhere along the way, you decided that wanting more than what you have is a character flaw, not a strategy, a flaw. You learned to distrust ambition the way other people distrust strangers, quietly, automatically, without ever examining why. So you built a life sized to your discomfort instead of your capacity. You check your account before rent leaves it, exhale when it clears, and call that relief a plan. And you called the shrinking wisdom. Niccolò Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most self-help never dares to say out loud. He observed that people do not fail to rise because they lack ability. They fail because they mistake self-protection for virtue, and they build their entire identity around staying safe rather than staying capable. The poor belief is not stupidity. It is a defense mechanism mistaken for a personality, and once a defense mechanism becomes a personality, you stop noticing it is even active. You simply call it who you are. You have felt this. The moment you thought about asking for more pay, more ownership, more room to be ambitious, you drafted the message, read it twice, and something in you flinched before you even hit send. That flinch was not fear of failure. It was fear of who you would have to become if you succeeded. Because success requires you to stop explaining your limitations, and explaining them has kept you comfortable for a very long time. That comfort was never rest. It was surrender in good manners. This is where most people quietly disqualify themselves, not through a single failure, but through thousands of small retreats that never felt like retreats at all. A job you didn't apply for, a rate you didn't raise, a conversation you didn't have. Together, they wrote a story you never agreed to. The first pattern is the quietest one. You were taught to equate wanting more with being ungrateful. You learned it the first time you actually asked for a raise, and heard yourself add, unprompted, that you know things are tight right now, an apology attached before anyone had even answered. Somewhere, someone told you to be thankful for what you have, and you absorbed it as a rule rather than as advice for a specific moment. So gratitude, which should have made you generous toward your own ambition, was quietly weaponized against it. The wealthy do not confuse gratitude with ceiling. They hold both at once, thankful for what exists, unwilling to stop building. The hidden cost is that you have spent years apologizing for wanting a life you have not even fully allowed yourself to imagine. What would you actually want if wanting it required no apology at all? There is a second pattern, and it hides inside your calendar. You have mistaken busyness for progress. Motion feels like proof that you are trying, so you fill your days with effort that never accumulates into anything. You can account for every hour of your week and still not explain why the number in your account looks the same as it did in January. The wealthy measure differently. They ask not how hard something was, but what it built. Machiavelli warned rulers against confusing constant activity with control. A prince who is always reacting is a prince who never actually governs. You have been governing your life by reaction, mistaking exhaustion for evidence of discipline. What might change if you stopped rewarding yourself for being tired? A third pattern lives in your body before it ever reaches your mind. You treat financial fear as intuition. Right before you send the pitch, ask about equity, or apply for the role that feels one size too big, you feel it, a tightening you call instinct, and act on it before your mind gets a vote. But instinct and conditioning feel identical from the inside. The wealthy have trained themselves to separate the two, to notice the tightening and ask whether it is protecting them or simply protecting the version of them that has never taken a real risk. The cost of confusing the two is that you have declined opportunities your own fear disguised as judgment, and called each decline a lesson in maturity. How many of your no's actually belong to someone else's caution, not yours? Every year this belief goes unnamed. It compounds quietly, while you call the pace of your life normal. Now stop and take an honest inventory, because this is the part most people skip past on their way to the next insight. Ask yourself which of your financial habits you have never once questioned, not because they were proven right, but because questioning them felt like questioning yourself. Somewhere in your life there is a rule about money you follow without knowing where it came from. You did not choose it. You inherited it the way you inherited a voice, a posture, a way of apologizing before you've done anything wrong. You will not fix what you refuse to name. So name it now, even if only to yourself, because the belief that keeps you poor cannot survive being looked at directly. Then there is the fourth pattern, the wait. You wait for permission that was never going to arrive. The annual review, the performance conversation, the year-end number, some external confirmation that you are now allowed to think bigger, as if a form somewhere is going to grant you that authority. The wealthy do not wait for permission because they understand something uncomfortable. Nobody is coming to hand you authority over your own ambition. Machiavelli's entire body of work rests on this. Power is taken through decisive action, not granted through patient waiting, because it removes the comfort of blaming circumstance. What exactly are you postponing, and who do you imagine is supposed to release you from that waiting room? The fifth pattern is the most expensive one because it hides inside your relationships. You confuse being liked with being safe. It shows up in the quiet math you do before the bill has even reached the table, calculating your share before anyone has picked up a menu. Somewhere you learned that standing out financially would cost you belonging, that people would resent your assent, so it was safer to stay level with everyone around you. It trades your future for a comfort that was never guaranteed to begin with. The wealthy accept a solitude most people are unwilling to pay for. Growth changes your relationships whether you rise or not. The only choice is whether it changes them while you improve. What relationships have you been protecting at the cost of your own ceiling? Now sit with something you have likely spent years believing that your restraint was protecting you. It was not. It was protecting the identity you built around being someone who does not ask for much. Every time you called yourself low maintenance, realistic, easygoing about money, you were not describing your values. You were narrating your fear in language polite enough to repeat at dinner. The restraint you are proud of is not humility. It is the poor belief wearing your own voice, dressed carefully enough to fool even you. This is not a call to greed. It is a call to honesty. There is a version of you that wanted more before you learned to talk yourself out of it, before caution became a personality and safety became an identity. That version did not disappear. It has been waiting, quietly, for you to stop mistaking its silence for peace. If this is landing somewhere specific, say so. Comment the exact moment you first learned to want less than you actually wanted, not the lesson, the moment itself, the room you were standing in, the person who said it. Because naming it is the first act that separates the people who stay poor in belief from the people who finally stop apologizing for their own appetite. You will not remember most of what was said here, but you will remember the flinch you felt when you recognized yourself in it. That flinch was never fear. It was the first honest thing your ambition has said to you in years. And the poor stay poor not because they lack desire, but because they were taught to distrust the only part of themselves that was ever telling the truth.